This is the story of how Bryce James shocked the basketball world by refusing a redshirt year and forcing his way into the 2024 NBA draft conversation. While everyone was focused on his older brother Bronny's professional debut, LeBron's younger son was quietly orchestrating his own basketball revolution behind the scenes. The James family has always lived under intense scrutiny, but what happened with Bryce represents something completely different from the carefully managed path we saw with Bronny. This wasn't a gradual transition or a predictable next step. This was a 17-year-old seizing control of his destiny and refusing to wait his turn, even when that meant going against conventional wisdom and potentially his father's initial plans. To understand how massive this decision really was, you have to understand where Bryce was supposed to be in his development timeline. Unlike Bronny, who had already finished his college season at USC and was a legitimate draft prospect, Bryce was still technically a high school player with elite college programs lined up and begging for his commitment. The original plan, according to multiple sources close to the family, was for Bryce to take a redshirt year at whichever college he chose, allowing him to develop physically and mentally while preserving his eligibility. But Bryce had other ideas. Sources within the basketball community started whispering about tension within the James household as early as March 2024. While LeBron was publicly supporting Bronny's draft declaration, privately he was dealing with his younger son's growing impatience with the traditional development path. Bryce had been watching his brother's journey closely, and he didn't like what he was seeing. The turning point came when Bryce witnessed the criticism and skepticism surrounding Bronny's draft stock. Despite being LeBron's son, Bronny faced constant questions about his abilities and whether he deserved his opportunities. Basketball analysts were brutal in their assessments, with many suggesting he wasn't NBA ready and should have stayed in college longer. For Bryce, this wasn't just criticism of his brother, it was a preview of what he could expect if he followed the same conservative approach. That's when Bryce made his move. In a series of conversations with his father that reportedly became increasingly heated, Bryce laid out his case for skipping the traditional college route entirely. He pointed to international players who were making impacts in the NBA at younger ages. He referenced the success of players who had bucked conventional wisdom. Most importantly, he argued that the James name would always come with pressure and criticism regardless of how much time he spent developing, so why not embrace it early? LeBron's initial reaction was reportedly one of concern and resistance. Having watched Bronny struggle with the intense scrutiny of being his son, LeBron wanted to protect Bryce from similar pressures. The plan had always been for Bryce to have more time to develop, to build his confidence away from the spotlight before making the jump to professional basketball. But Bryce wasn't interested in protection, he wanted opportunity. The situation reached a breaking point when Bryce essentially forced his father's hand through a calculated series of moves. First, he began working out with professional trainers rather than focusing on high school competition. Then he started making public statements about his NBA aspirations that caught the basketball world off guard. Most dramatically, he reportedly told college coaches who were recruiting him that he was no longer interested in scholarship offers because he had bigger plans. What made this even more shocking was the timing. While Bronny was going through his own draft process and dealing with questions about his readiness, Bryce was simultaneously building his case for an even more aggressive timeline. Family sources describe a period where the James household was essentially running two separate basketball operations: Bronny's immediate draft preparation and Bryce's long-term professional planning. The basketball community's reaction was swift and divided. Scouts who had been tracking Bryce's development were caught completely off guard. Many had penciled him in as a future college star with NBA potential down the line, but none were prepared for him to accelerate his timeline so dramatically. Some praised his confidence and ambition, while others questioned whether he was making a mistake that could harm his long-term development. LeBron found himself in an impossible position. As a father, he wanted to guide his son toward what he believed was the safest path for development. As someone who understood the basketball business, he knew that Bryce's aggressive approach could either fast-track his success or expose him to criticism he wasn't ready to handle. The decision became even more complex when it became clear that Bryce wasn't just testing the waters. He was fully committed to this path regardless of his father's approval. The breakthrough came when LeBron LeBron realized that fighting Bryce's determination might be more harmful than supporting it. In what sources describe as a pivotal family meeting, LeBron shifted from resistance to full support, but with conditions. If Bryce was going to pursue this accelerated path, it would be done with the full resources and planning of the James family machine behind him. This is where LeBron's decision to pull Bryce from traditional competition became strategic rather than reactive. Instead of allowing Bryce to continue in environments where his every move would be scrutinized and compared to traditional development paths, LeBron created a controlled environment focused entirely on NBA preparation. This meant intensive professional training, specialized coaching, and carefully managed exposure to NBA level competition. The move sent shockwaves through the basketball establishment. College coaches who had been courting Bryce suddenly found themselves dealing with a completely changed situation. High school basketball lost one of its most anticipated players. Most significantly, the NBA community had to start taking seriously the possibility that LeBron might have two sons in professional basketball simultaneously. What makes Bryce's situation different from other young players who have pursued accelerated paths is the unique combination of natural talent, family resources, and strategic planning. Unlike players who might rush to professional basketball out of financial necessity, Bryce's decision was purely about maximizing his basketball potential and refusing to accept artificial limitations on his timeline. The training regimen that LeBron designed for Bryce after pulling him from traditional competition was reportedly unlike anything seen for a player his age. It included NBA-level strength and conditioning programs, specialized skills training with former professional players, and mental preparation designed to handle the unique pressures of being LeBron's son in professional basketball. Bryce's decision represents a fundamental shift in how elite young players view their development paths. For decades, the progression from high school to college to professional basketball was seen as nearly inevitable for American players, but Bryce's willingness to reject that timeline entirely signals a new era where top prospects might increasingly view traditional paths as obstacles rather than necessary steps. The long-term implications of this decision extend far beyond Bryce's individual career. If his accelerated approach proves successful, it could inspire other elite young players to question whether traditional development timelines make sense in an era where basketball skills can be developed through specialized training rather than just competitive experience. For LeBron, supporting Bryce's decision required him to balance his roles as father and basketball mentor in ways he hadn't experienced with Bronny. While Bronny's path had been relatively conventional despite the family name, Bryce's approach demanded that LeBron become more directly involved in creating opportunities and managing a situation that had no real precedent. The basketball world now watches with fascination and concern as this unprecedented experiment unfolds. Bryce James didn't just refuse a redshirt year, he rejected the entire conventional wisdom about player development and forced everyone around him, including his father, to reimagine what's possible for elite young talent. Whether this bold gamble pays off remains to be seen, but one thing is certain: Bryce James has already changed the conversation about player development in ways that will influence young basketball players for years to come. His refusal to wait his turn might just prove that sometimes the biggest risk is playing it safe.